I want to welcome Janice Langbehn to our microphone. She is a social worker in Washington State. She and her partner, Lisa Pond, had been together from 1989 until we lost her in 2007. They had a commitment ceremony in 1991. And Janice, I guess you, largely because of you, Barack Obama signed an executive order allowing visitation among same-sex couples, right?
That is correct. And I'm obviously very humbled that the president would recognize our small family.
Tell us your story, because I'm sorry, I mean to interrupt you there, but you had an incredible story that you met Lisa in 1988, began a relationship in 1989. Tell us about your relationship and what led to this.
Well, we met at the University of Puget Sound, which is in Tacoma, Washington. She was a year ahead of me. We were both psychology majors, and if you believe in love at first sight, I think that's pretty much what happened. And about a year and a half after we started dating, we had a commitment ceremony, a holy union, in which my family was present and our closest friends. And we just knew we wanted to have a family. And being social workers, both of us, we just knew there was so many foster children. There's about 18,000 in Washington State alone. And so we became foster parents at just the age of 21 and 22. And our first daughter was only 14, so there wasn't much of an age difference.
And she stayed home and played mom, and you continued your career with child welfare services, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I finished 2 masters thanks to her. You know, she stayed home with the kids. I worked full time. I completed 2 masters, and through the years we fostered 25 children, adopting 4.
Now, was it you were diagnosed with MS?
Correct.
The day of your last adoption.
That is correct, yeah.
But then you were about to go on a cruise, and Lisa took ill. Tell us what happened.
You know, and Lisa was the healthy one, 39 years old, and probably in our 18 years together, she'd seen our doctor twice for an ear infection, literally. And we were going on our family cruise, the Rosie O'Donnell cruise, and it was to celebrate our 15 years of our holy union, or 18 years together, whichever way you want to look at it. So it was pretty exciting. It was the kids' midwinter break, and so we head to Miami to do this, and we board the boat. We meet Kelly Carpenter, Rosie's now ex-partner, check out the ship. We have lunch literally 20 minutes before she collapses. She goes up to watch the kids play basketball while I'm unpacking, and the next thing I know, the kids are pounding on the door. And I take one look at her, and having worked in ERs as a social worker, I knew it was really bad.
What was wrong with her?
When the kids brought her in, I mean, she couldn't stand on her own. One whole side of her body was paralyzed.
So she had a stroke?
You know, not knowing right away. I didn't know. We knew sign language because of foster kids not being able to speak, you know. And so I kept saying, "Did you hit your head?" I thought that's why she fell, maybe a concussion. And she was so clear, signing, "No, that wasn't it." So I knew it wasn't that. So all I could think of is some kind of brain event, but I don't know. So they hold up the ship for us, and thank God we didn't, you know, leave port. And rushed her to Jackson Memorial's Ryder Trauma Center, and the kids and I, along with all our luggage bound for the Bahamas, you know, arrived the exact same time.
Now, you were informed by a social worker there, something of quite a controversial nature. What was said to you?
Well, when he came out and he says, "Well, I'm the social worker," and I thought by saying I'm a social worker too that we could speak the same lingo, you know, and he just looked at me. And I'll just never forget just this blank look at me saying, you know, "Sorry, this is an anti-gay city and state, and you won't get to see her. And I'm not going to tell you anything about her condition without the proper paperwork."
Now, is he legally wrong to do that?
Well, you know, we did file a lawsuit. Lambda Legal represented us, and it came down to... well, what he said was without the proper paperwork. And then because it was President's Day weekend, he said, "Well, good luck getting into court before Tuesday." And I said, I have the paperwork. I have a power of attorney. I have a living will and advance directive.
The point is he could have helped you if he wanted to.
Yeah, he could have. And I never saw that gentleman again
And the hospital denied that. The hospital denied that he ever said that.
Oh,
right?
I know. Yeah.
So you did get a little bit of time with your partner, correct, in her room?
After life-saving measures stopped, and I informed him that she was an organ donor, that there was just no possibility she would survive this aneurysm. Pastor came up to me and I said, I need a priest. We need to do her last rites. And so a priest escorted me back. And so for as long as it takes to do last rites is how long I saw her. But there was other families in that waiting room with my children and I that were being brought back, including children younger than mine that were being brought back. In fact, when I went back to do last rites, the gentleman that was in the curtain to the right of Lisa had a visitor, and the person to the left. So what am I to think if I'm the only one being left out in the waiting room with my children? And I've had this said to me.
And as you have said, no one should die alone.
No.
What did you do after that?
After we first had a funeral in Connecticut where she's from, and then here at home, and as things settled in, I just kept replaying it in my head, what could I have done differently? What did I do wrong? And I just kept coming back to, I had the paperwork, how could they have done this to her? How could my children not have been able to say goodbye to their mom? And so I reached out to the hospital in several letters saying, I deserve an apology. I made an online complaint against the social worker, Garnett Frederick, and amazingly it was lost. So here locally in Olympia, Washington, my story was found out by the Pride Committee, and I was asked to speak at the Pride gathering that June. And then my story got picked up by the local paper and then the Miami Herald. Well, what do you know? Then the hospital contacts me. They ignored all my other letters earlier.
So the media kind of got them to pay attention.
Yeah, then the PR person calls, and he's like, well, we don't have your, complaint. And then all of a sudden somebody says, oh, yeah, we do. It just got lost in the system.
And Yeah. So after that, how did that lead to the president doing what he recently did?
So after getting zero response, I went to Lambda Legal. A friend of mine said, call the ACLU or call Lambda, see if there's anything. Lambda was wise enough and took our case and said it was a long shot because Florida obviously doesn't have the greatest record on gay rights, as we all know. And so we filed the lawsuit. There was a lot of press around it, and the judge dismissed it. Though in his closing paragraph, he believed all of my allegations and said it was unbecoming how this hospital treated me, but there was no remedy in the law. So I was feeling like a failure all over again. Then 6 months later, the New York Times did an article about our family, and at that time, Chief of Staff Rahm Emanuel read it at a senior staff meeting and said, how can this happen in our country? And that's how the ball began rolling, and he brought it to the attention of the president, which led, and why President Obama chose April 15th, 2 days after the hospital changed their policy to be inclusive. I mean, if they did nothing wrong, why did they need to change their policies, right? Yeah. So 2 days later, the president, he calls me from Air Force One, and, the first thing he said was, I'm so sorry this happened to you. And I'm directing Secretary Sebelius to change visitation rules. And so then we came to the White House for the Pride celebration in June. The kids and I were able to meet with the president one-on-one and meet with Secretary Sebelius. And then Lambda Legal and our family were involved in the discussion of how the rules came about. And then they were published this past Tuesday, which was the 3-year, 11-month anniversary of Lisa's passing.
It's really an amazing story, and when those people who say, well, domestic partnerships, that's fine, well, they don't go far enough for this very reason, because unless you can have the same rights that spouses have, there are not equal rights in this country.
No, and it was even more clear, and Lisa's family's asked for privacy, so I never say their name, but her sister drove down from Jacksonville, so it's like an 8-hour drive. So as soon as I tell her, you need to get here, something's really wrong, she drives straight down. She comes into the waiting room I've been waiting in for 8 hours with my children and says, I'm Lisa's sister. They give her the room number where Lisa is and open the doors for her without ID, without anything. and yet I'd been standing here with our children with the legal documents.
Wow. Well, it's a terrific battle you fought, and I mean that in the best sense of the word, and
Thank you.
You must feel a great sense of accomplishment and great memory of your partner.
I do. And I think the overall lesson, there's two to take away from this, is that regardless of your marital status, everyone needs to have powers of attorney, living wills, and advance directives, regardless if you're married or not, because this regulation is only for visitation. It doesn't allow you to make medical decisions or people are incapacitated, so that's critical.